fully licensed, fully operational nuclear plant was handed over to the government, priced at $2.3 billion, and immediately scheduled for demolition. And the most insane part isn't the waste. It's that the same politicians who killed it knew it was safe, admitted it was safe, and killed it anyway. This is the story of how one governor's political career cost Long Island ratepayers more money than the Apollo program. Not for a single day. The year was 1989. Long Island Lighting Company, LILCO, handed over the keys to a fully operational nuclear power plant. Every system tested, every rod inspected, every safeguard certified by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission itself. And then, under direct order from New York Governor Mario Cuomo, they agreed to permanently close it, before it generated a single commercial kilowatt. The price tag at that moment, $2.3 billion the electricity produced for Long Island ratepayers. Zero. How does something like that happen? Go back to 1966. America was still drunk on the atom. Nuclear power wasn't just energy. It was the future in physical form. The Atomic Energy Commission was projecting that by the year 2000, nuclear plants would supply half of all American electricity. LILCO believed them. LILCO's executives looked at Long Island, densely populated, no coal, no gas, completely dependent on expensive oil. And they saw a perfect problem: nuclear was the answer. So they broke ground on an 820 megawatt reactor in Shoreham, a quiet hamlet on the north shore of Suffolk County. Estimated cost, $75 million letters. Estimated completion, 1973. The numbers looked clean. The logic looked airtight. What could go wrong? But 1973 came and went. So did 1974 and 1975. Construction delays compounded inflation, specifically the brutal stagflation of the 1970s, hit the construction industry like a freight train. Between 1973 and 1980, construction costs across the entire nuclear industry increased by over 200%. New safety regulations after 3 Mile Island in March 1979 forced expensive redesigns mid-build. LILCO kept revising the price upward. $75 million became $300 million, and then $700 million, then one-third of $1 billion. The utility kept borrowing, kept building. The sunk cost was becoming an anchor, and there were people who saw it. Dr. Charles Komanoff, an energy economist based in New York, published detailed analyses in the late 1970s, showing that nuclear construction costs were spiraling industry-wide beyond any point of economic rationality. He named the specific projects, he ran the numbers. His reports landed. They were read. And then they were set aside. Inside LILCO, engineers flagged the compounding delays in internal memos as early as 1977. Those memos exist. They are in the public record. The warnings were not hidden. They were simply inconvenient. Meanwhile, Suffolk County officials began raising a different alarm. Not about cost, about safety. Specifically evacuation. Shoreham sat on Long Island, a geographic trap. One island, limited bridges and tunnels off it. Nearly 3 million people in Suffolk and Nassau counties. In 1982, Suffolk County conducted its own emergency planning study. The conclusion was stark. A safe, orderly evacuation of the area surrounding Shoreham in the event of a nuclear accident was, quote, not possible. The county formally refused to participate in any evacuation plan. Without county cooperation, federal law required the NRC to withhold an operating license LILCO was still building. The foundation was already cracking. Here is where the specific decisions matter. LILCO's leadership, under Chairman William Katacosinos, chose to fight. They had $2 billion sunk. They believed, genuinely believed, that technical arguments could override political opposition. Katacosinos authorized LILCO to develop its own evacuation plan, using school bus drivers as emergency responders. They submitted it. They lobbied Washington. They spent an additional $200 million in legal and regulatory battles through the mid-1980s. The logic wasn't irrational, given what they knew. They had a licensed plant. They had federal certification. They believed federal authority would supersede local resistance. They were wrong. What Katacosinos didn't fully calculate was Mario Cuomo. The governor had been elected in 1982. He was methodical, legally trained, and opposed to Shoreham. He didn't need to win in court. He needed to hold the line politically long enough that the economics destroyed LILCO on their own, and they nearly did. By 1985, LILCO's debt load from Shoreham construction had pushed the company to the edge of bankruptcy. Its bond rating was slashed. Its stock had collapsed from a 1965 high rate. Payers on Long Island were already paying among the highest electricity rates in the continental United States. So why didn't the federal government simply override the state? Because in April 1986, Chernobyl happened. Reactor number 4. At the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power plant in Soviet Ukraine exploded on April 26, 1986. The political atmosphere around nuclear power in America shifted overnight. Public opposition to Shoreham, already significant, became overwhelming. Polling in Suffolk County showed opposition above 70%. The NRC granted Shoreham a low-power operating license in July 1985. They ran the reactor at 5% capacity, but a full power license required the evacuation problem to be solved. It never was. On February 28, 1989, Lilco and New York State reached an agreement. Lilco would transfer Shoreham to the state for $1. In exchange, Lilco would be allowed rate increases to recover $1.6 billion of its $2 to $3 billion loss over time from ratepayers. The plant would be permanently closed and decommissioned. The NRC officially accepted the surrender of the operating license on May 26, 1994. Decommissioning itself cost an additional $186 million and took years. The Shoreham plant was demolished. The land sits largely unused. Long Island ratepayers paid elevated electricity bills for years to cover the recovery mechanism. The final number, including financing costs, interest, and decommissioning, approximately $6 billion when fully accounted across the rate recovery period, for 0 kilowatts of commercial power. William Katacazinos resigned as Lilco chairman in 1997 after the company merged into Keyspan Energy. No criminal charges were ever filed against any Lilco executive. The company's shareholders absorbed losses. Ratepayers absorbed the rest through mandated rate structures. The engineers who filed those early memos went back to their careers. Suffolk County officials who blocked the evacuation plan were re-elected. Governor Cuomo left office in 1994 after losing his third-term bid to George Pataki. For entirely unrelated reasons, nobody went to prison. Nobody gave the money back. Here is what this story is actually about. It is not about corruption. It is not about malice. Every major actor, Lilco's executives, the regulators, the county officials, the governor, behaved according to their own institutional logic. That is the pattern. The plant didn't fail because someone was lying. It failed because a $75 million decision made in 1966 locked in every subsequent decision. Each additional dollar spent made walking away harder. Each delay made the politics worse. Each safety regulation made the economics worse. And nobody had the authority or the incentive to call the whole thing off at the right moment. By the time the right moment existed, there was no right moment. This is what economists call the escalation of commitment. You know it as the sunk cost fallacy, but at institutional scale, it doesn't feel like a fallacy. It feels like responsibility. It feels like protecting the investment. It feels like seeing it through. That feeling has destroyed more capital than fraud ever has. Fraud at least has a villain. This had none. It had something worse. It had everyone doing their job. Next week, the company that invented the smartphone watched Apple launch the iPhone and then did nothing. The internal Nokia documents that explain exactly why subscribe? You'll want to see this one.